Do you want your race car to be faster and handle better, but are overwhelmed by the tuning menu in Forza Motorsport and don't know where to start? I was in the same boat once, and yes, properly tuning the last minute details of a car can be very complicated. But I can tell you from experience that you can ignore a lot of the tuning settings in the beginning, follow some basic rules, and you can already get very far in improving your car a ton. In a lot of cases, you can also easily improve your lap times quite significantly with just these few changes. It's not very complicated, as we're gonna trim down on where and how we actually make our tuning work. Tires? We're only gonna set some default values. Gearing? Only if really necessary. Alignment? Again, just some default changes. Springs? Dampening? Suspension geometry? We're gonna completely ignore those. Our main adjustments are going to be made in just these four categories. Anti-roll bars for low to mid speeds, aero for mid to high speeds, and differential and brake for acceleration, deceleration and braking. All of these will follow some basic rules and are only adjusted if the car has problems in that particular area. I want to show you those basic rules and also provide you with examples of how I adjusted 3 stock cars from the Multiplayer Spec Series with small changes to big effect. Whether you want your car to simply be faster or introduce more stability to the car to be more consistent, I've got you covered. You can already see in the background that I was able to improve my lap times by over a second in some cases, and I want to show you how easy this can be. And with that, welcome to HD Racing. If you're new around here and find this to be helpful, please consider helping me out by subscribing to the channel. And thank you so much if you are already subscribed. It goes a long way in supporting the channel. Just as a heads up, in this video I want to focus on fine-tuning race cars, as those are also the focus of most of the multiplayer series. Upgrading and tuning street cars, especially in lower PI classes, is a little bit of a different process. If you want to see a video on that, please let me know in the comments and I'll make sure to cover that topic in the future as well. Also, I know that this is not the be-all and end-all of tuning guides. I'm simplifying a lot here to get you started on your tuning journey, without any of the complicated details which can be present if you start to dig deeper. But let's now get started with tuning our race cars and make them way better with very easy to follow steps. The first thing you will always need to do before you even get started with tuning is driving the car in its stock form, so without any tuning done to it. You can either do that in multiplayer or take the car to single player and drive it there. If you don't know how to get the stock tunes from cars of the Spec Series in multiplayer into single player, I will show you at the end of the video. I would recommend setting up a free play race without any driver tasks, so you can make changes to your tuning while on the track and test the effects immediately without being annoyed by AI. The focus of your driving should at this point be to figure out any problems or weaknesses of the car. Try to find out where your car understeers, oversteers, or is just very unstable. Understeer occurs when your front tires don't have enough grip and you feel like your car really should turn more, but it seems to slide with the front tires and go more straight than actually turning. Oversteer, on the other hand, occurs when your rear tires don't have enough grip and the back end of your car starts to come around on you instead of pushing you forward or into a turn. Some oversteer is quite good in most cases, as it helps the car to rotate, but too much of it can make your car really difficult to control or just feel very unstable. Both under and oversteer can occur at different times during driving around the track. At the entry to a corner or the exit, more at low or at high speeds, and during acceleration or while off the throttle or even braking. Really take note of your car's behavior, so you have an idea of what you actually want to fix with tuning. You can fix under and oversteer problems at these different times with adjusting specific settings that I'm gonna show you. Always be aware that reducing understeer in a certain setting might induce more oversteer and vice versa, so don't go overboard with setting adjustments. If you have the time, do every section of settings one by one and increase and decrease only a little bit and get back on track and see the effects of your change. Also, try to see if there are any additional problems, like a really bad standing start or not great top speed. Once you have an idea of what you want fixed in your car's behavior, it's finally time to head into the tuning menu. At this point, I could now just tell you the theory behind every setting and how it affects the car's behavior. But not only is that complicated and a bit boring, but I also think it is way better to actually learn by example. So let me now show you 3 cars from the Multiplayer Spec Series, all with their different problems, and I will show you how I fixed them. Our first car is the Lamborghini Essenza, which I already showed you in a previous GT quick look, as well as in the comparison to the Audi R8 in another video. As I stated there, the Essenza really suffers from heavy understeer almost everywhere and all the time. It also feels very slow off the line and just doesn't seem very fast at all. But we can fix all of that, at least to some degree. In the background you can see a comparison of my fastest lap in the untuned car on the left and the tuned car on the right. The difference is quite significant. Over 1 second gained without spending a lot of time on fine-tuning every minute detail. You can do that as well. Let me show you how. I always start my tuning in the differential section, which I will call diff from now on. Here you can tune your car's behavior while going on and off the throttle. Increasing the acceleration setting will reduce understeer and at the same time increase oversteer while accelerating. Decreasing this setting will do the opposite, so reduce oversteer but increase understeer on throttle. The Lambo Essenza really understeers heavily while applying the throttle, which is why I increased the acceleration setting for the diff by a lot, almost maxing it out. It also understeers heavily while off the throttle though, which is why I reduced the deceleration by quite a lot as well, going as low as 3% here. This is because the deceleration diff setting works opposite to the acceleration setting. Increasing it will induce more understeer and reduce oversteer, while decreasing the setting will do the opposite, which is what we want here. The next setting is somewhat related. Brake. Setting the brake bias a little bit more towards the rear will help the car rotate more under braking, helping to reduce understeer while turning into a corner. Moving the slider more towards the front would reduce oversteer and instability under braking, but this car doesn't need that and can benefit from more rotation on corner entry by moving it more towards the rear. Small changes can already have a big effect here, so don't go overboard. I personally wouldn't touch the brake pressure at all. Adjusting both the differential and the brake bias will already improve the car's handling a lot during acceleration, braking and coasting. Now it's time to fix any over or understeer at mid to high speeds. This is easily done with the aero settings. Increasing the downforce on the front will reduce understeer while inducing more oversteer. Lowering it would have the opposite effect, but generally it's best not to decrease but only increase the front downforce. Increasing the rear downforce will reduce oversteer at mid to high speeds while also inducing understeer. It also will result in more drag, making the car slower. So generally you would either leave the rear downforce as is or lower it to reduce understeer and induce a bit of oversteer, all the while improving the acceleration and speed of your car. Since the Lambo Essenza also has a lot of understeer at high speeds, I increased the front downforce to the maximum and also lowered the rear downforce quite significantly. This leads to a more lively car during high-speed cornering, while still being very controllable, since the car still has a lot of downforce keeping it stable. If there are over or understeer problems present at low to mid speeds, this is best adjusted with the anti-roll bars, or ARBs for short. In Forza Motorsport, it seems that stiffer ARBs are generally better. Even still, decreasing the front ARB will reduce understeer a bit while inducing more oversteer. I like to play more with the rear ARB, which will have the opposite effect of the front one, so increasing the rear ARB will reduce understeer while inducing more oversteer. Reduce the rear ARB if you need to reduce oversteer at low to mid speeds, if a little more understeer is okay for the car. The Lambo can really do with reducing understeer more though, so I maxed out the rear ARB while leaving the front one as is. Setting the anti-roll bars correctly can give you a lot more rotation at low speeds or make the car more stable if that is what it needs. The last big section for general car stability and responsiveness we are gonna touch is the alignment. I will not go into much detail here, but just give you a general guideline. The camber on some of the cars in Forza is set way too negative in the stock tunes, which will lead to not using all of the tire to grip onto the road surface. I generally just set the camber to -1.5 in the front and -1 in the back, which is a good starting point for most cars. The same goes for the front caster, which I normally just increase to about 6. This will improve the turn-in feeling a bit without many downsides. Toe I will usually just leave alone. You could however reset it to 0 on both front and rear if you want. You could go really in depth in the alignment tab and spend lots of time fine-tuning with the help of the in-game telemetry. But if you just go close to these values, you will already be 90% there, which is good enough for me. Let's take a quick look at the tires tab as well. I generally don't spend much time here either and just try to see that the pressures are somewhat making sense. I aim for between 2 and 2.2 bar or 29 to 32 psi here. For some reason the front pressure is set really high on the Essenza, so I just reduced that. You can again do a lot more fine-tuning with using the telemetry data on track, but I feel like setting it roughly here is enough in most cases. One last thing we need to take a look at for this car is the gearing. Luckily, a lot of cars you will not have to change anything here, but the Lambo really struggles to get going from a standing start and feels generally slow, so let's get that fixed. Adjusting the final drive will make all the gears longer or shorter, which can help if you are struggling to reach a good top speed on tracks like Le Mans or just need more acceleration in general. For this car, we need to adjust all the gears though, since it's mostly just the first one which is too long. A good indication of what to do can be found in the bottom left diagram. You want your gears from third onward to be somewhat similar in shape, with the second being a bit longer and the first obviously being the longest. As you can see, for the Lambo I pushed the first gear quite a lot more towards acceleration and the second one a bit as well. I then adjusted the following gears to be somewhat similar in shape. Getting this set up well can be very finicky, so I suggest going on track often to see what effect your changes made to the gears. Once you're happy with how the gears are set up in relation to each other, you can do your last adjustments with the final drive. Make sure that your car can still reach a good top speed while not sacrificing on acceleration too much. Let me now show you the difference that this change makes on a standing start for the Lamborghini Essenza. You can see that the tuned car on the right instantly gets more of its power down on track. It can go through the first 2 gears more quickly and pulls ahead of the untuned car quite significantly. As you maybe could see, the tuned car already gears up to 3rd as the stock car is just able to get to 2nd gear. When the tuned car reaches the 150 board, look at how far the untuned car is still behind. It makes quite the difference, but as I said, it can be a bit finicky to set up as well. Alright, let me show you the adjustments I made to the Lambo once again, while also showing you the best lap with those tuning changes again. The car now really feels a lot more alive and can go into and out of corners way easier and with more speed. It generally feels a lot faster and better to drive, while still being very tame and easy to control. I probably didn't spend more than 10 to 15 minutes on the tuning itself, with a lot of that in trying to figure out on how to set the gears right. If you don't have to do that, it will be even quicker. One example of that is our next car, which has some different problems than the Essenza, the Acura NSX. As I've shown you in a GT Quick Look video, the Acura NSX feels very alive, but can be a bit oversteery and unstable in certain situations, especially on throttle. Let's try to fix that real quick. Again, we are starting with the differential. Since I want more stability while accelerating, I've decreased the acceleration diff setting to 40. I normally don't go this low, but I really felt that this car needed it. This already makes the car way more stable on throttle. I did not want to make huge changes in the deceleration setting, as the car is just a tiny bit unstable here, which is why I only increased this setting by 1%. I instead opted to get more stability under braking with adjusting brake balance. I shifted it more towards the front to get more stability and reduce oversteer while braking and turning into a corner. As with the Lambo, adjusting both the diff and the brake bias already makes a huge difference in how the car feels under acceleration, braking and coasting. To get a bit more stability and also speed from the car, let's take a look at the aero settings. While increasing the rear downforce would help a lot with car stability, it also would increase drag, making the car slower, which is why I didn't do that. Instead, I decreased the front aero by 20 and the rear aero by only 10. This change will lead to a bit more aero balance shifted to the front, increasing stability, while also making the car a bit faster. In the anti-roll bar department, again, only small changes are necessary. I made the front ARB stiffer in this case to reduce a bit of oversteer at low speeds. While I normally would make the rear diff stiffer as well, in this case that would increase oversteer again, so I just left it alone. The alignment of the Acura was almost fine, with the camber already being set up well. Only the front caster needed to be increased to 6 to get a bit better turn and response. Tire pressures and gearing were totally fine on this car, so nothing to adjust there. And that's already everything I did for the Acura NSX. Let's take a look at the full lap with the improved setup. As you will be able to see, this didn't massively improve my lap times. What it did was make the car more stable, which led to me being more confident and consistent. I was able to get close to this lap time way more often, while before I was struggling to get a consistent pace going. So, this is an example of how small changes can make a difficult to drive car way better to handle, while not making it slower at the same time. Let's now shift gears again and take a look at a touring car, which does not have any major problems. But we can make it faster. A lot faster. The Lynk & Co was also already featured in a previous video, and I really didn't have any complaints about the car. It felt good to drive, though understeery like almost every touring car. Let's try to make it a bit better while trying to improve general performance. In the differential section, I find that for front-wheel drive cars there is no reason to not open up the diff completely, meaning 100% on acceleration and 0% on deceleration. There is almost no downside, since front-wheel drive cars rarely get any problems with oversteering. If you experience lift-off oversteer though, which is oversteer occurring right when you lift off the throttle, then you can increase the deceleration setting a bit. But don't go too crazy, as this can make you understeer more while going into a turn. The brake balance on this car was set quite aggressively towards the rear. While the idea is good, so you get more rotation under braking, I found that this much was not needed. I found better braking performance by actually putting the slider more towards the middle. The car still felt very good on turn-in, but I felt like I could brake a bit later for turns. The aero settings can make a huge difference in lap times for touring cars. They are mostly so stable and understeery that they really don't need much downforce at the rear. This is why I reduced it to the minimum. I kept the front downforce as is, as the shifted aero balance will also make the car more grippy on the front, but in some cars you might get away with going even higher here. With the anti-roll bars, I opted to just stiffen the rear ARB by quite a lot while leaving the front ARB as is. This will also reduce understeer even further, especially in the slower sections where aero doesn't help much. The alignment was set up pretty crazy in my opinion. I reduced both the front and rear camber massively to my standard values of -1.5 and -1. That should improve the tire contact patch with the road a lot, while also probably being helpful for tire durability. The front caster I just set to 6, as I always do. Last check to make is on tire pressures. Once again, the front tire pressure was set quite high, so I reduced it a bit to be more or less in the optimal window. And that are all the changes I made for the Lynk & Co. I was really surprised by the result. As I said, the car felt great to drive in the stock tuning already. But my first lap after doing the tuning was already almost 1 whole second faster than any previous lap with a stock car. And you may have already seen it in the beginning. After a couple of more laps, I was able to go more than 1.4 seconds faster than my best time in the stock car. And at the same time, the Lynk & Co still felt very pleasant to drive and the tuning had not induced any bad behavior. So as you can see, it doesn't take much to make a car that already feels quite good even better and simply faster. So, let's recap. No matter if your car is very understeery and slow, oversteery and unstable, or feels good to drive already, you can improve the car a ton with just a little bit of tuning. To do that, drive the car you want to tune to figure out what you actually need to fix or improve with tuning. Once you are ready, start in the differential section to change the car's behavior while going on and off the throttle. For every section, I will show you these graphics so you can see what increasing or decreasing any setting does. OS with an up arrow means that oversteer will increase if you push the setting in this direction. This will always correlate with understeer going down, and vice versa if you change the setting in the other direction, of course. For acceleration, try to stay between 40 and 100 for rear-wheel drive cars and at or close to 100 in front-wheel drive cars. For deceleration, rear-wheel drive cars can operate between 0 and 20, while front-wheel drive cars should stay close to 0 but can go up to 10 if necessary. The next section is setting your brake bias, where you can affect your car's behavior under braking and going into a corner. Try not to stray too far from 50%, because even 1 to 2% changes can make a big difference here. I would recommend staying between 45 and 55%. If your car needs tuning at higher speeds, then the aero settings are for you. You can make your car faster as well by reducing aero in general. There are not really recommended values here, but try to go as low as possible on the rear aero while still keeping the car stable in high-speed corners. Adjust the front aero to either get more or less understeer at high speeds, depending on what the car needs. Keep in mind that this is more about the ratio between the front and rear aero than any specific value. At lower speeds, the anti-roll bar setting is what you want to adjust. Try to go as stiff as possible most of the time, as that seems to work best in Forza. It is more about the ratio between the front and rear again here than actual values, so try to adjust the one which will make an overall stiffer setup while reducing what you need to reduce, be it over or understeer. In the alignment section, just make sure that the camber is not set way too high. Values between -1 and -2 are totally fine for both front and rear. I usually set the front to -1.5 and the rear to -1 and leave it at that. The story is very similar with caster. Usually it is quite beneficial for turn-in response to increase it a bit. But anything between 5 and 6.5 is quite fine, depending on how immediate you want the turn-in response to be. I just set it at 6 most of the time. For tires, just look for way too high or too low settings. Anything between 2 and 2.2 bar or 29 to 32 psi is totally fine. You can use the telemetry to really set this correctly on track if you want to, but it's not absolutely necessary. In the gearing section, only tune your final drive if possible. That will make it faster and easier to set up your car for good acceleration and top speed. But if you need to, you can adjust the individual gears as I've shown you for the Lambo Essenza. As I said in the beginning, I would recommend leaving all the other settings alone as a beginner to tuning. Do some testing on track after you've done your changes and adjust further if you feel something is still off. And then you are done with your basic tune for your car. Remember to save the tune by going to the Setup Manager and selecting Save. Which leads us nicely to how you can get the tunes from multiplayer into single player if you don't know how to do that yet. Head into a multiplayer lobby and pick the car you want to have the tune for. In the menu, select Car and then Tuned Car. In the tuning menu, press the button for the Setup Manager. You can find which button that is for you at the bottom of the screen. In the menu, select Save and afterwards a free slot. You give the tune a name and you are done here. In single player, you can then again head into the tuning menu and open the Setup Manager once more. Now go to My Tunes and select the tune you just saved in multiplayer. From this point on, you can adjust the car as described before and save the tune once you are happy with it. You will be able to load it in multiplayer as well, because the underlying upgrades to the car will still be the same. And with that, I really hope that I was able to show you that getting started with tuning is not as difficult as it may seem, but that even small changes can make a big difference in car performance and lap time. Considerable effort went into creating this video, so I would massively appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Let me know how you get on with tuning your race cars, and also feel free to ask any questions you might have and I'll try my best to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I've been HD Racing. See you next time.